Cooper Antique smelled of old pine and slow afternoons. Olivia Carter ran her hand along a walnut sideboard while Jack Sullivan, sleeves of his blue flannel rolled up and sawdust clinging to one cuff, crouched to test a joint. Martha Cooper returned carrying the receipt and smiled. "Your husband knows his wood, ma'am. You picked well." Jack grinned. "She also picked a lamp with a broken switch and refuses to admit it." Martha laughed. Jack laughed. Olivia looked down at her hands and spoke so quietly it almost sounded like she was talking to herself. "I wish that weren't a joke." Martha stopped laughing. Jack's hands became still. Black Mountain disappeared behind them as the truck climbed onto the Blue Ridge Parkway. Pine trees lined the road, dark and steady. Olivia turned toward the window and kept her gaze there. Jack drove with one hand on the wheel and the other resting on the gear shift. 3 miles passed before he finally spoke. "Hey!" His voice was easy. "Wife, you're awfully quiet over there." Olivia never looked at him. "Don't call me that if you're only joking, Jack." His hand tightened on the steering wheel. The atmosphere inside the cab changed in a single breath. He didn't try again. They rolled into Asheville beneath a clear noon sky and turned into Montford, where the historic houses leaned toward one another like old neighbors trading stories. Olivia's house sat halfway up the block, a 2-story home with peeling cream paint and a deep front porch. 6 weeks of Jack's cruise work had made it solid again. 2 more weeks would make it hers. They unloaded in silence. The walnut sideboard, the floor lamp with the honest brass base, the 2 ladder-back chairs, the small bookcase Olivia had chosen because one panel of grain reminded her of weather. Jack carried the heavy pieces. Olivia studied the doorways. Neither spoke unless necessary, and when they did, it was about angles and clearance. Eleanor Hayes watched from the front window of the house next door and didn't come outside. She had 8-year-old Lily Sullivan with her that morning, the way she often did whenever Jack was on a job site. Eleanor had been Jack's client 3 years earlier when he restored the historic sash windows in her parlor without breaking a single piece of original glass. 6 weeks ago, she had called Olivia, whose mother she had loved like a sister, and told her there was only one contractor in Asheville she trusted with the Montford house. That was how Jack Sullivan entered Olivia Carter's life. In 6 weeks, they had built a rhythm. Professional, polite, specific. He brought coffee every Thursday because she had once mentioned Thursdays were the hardest day of her week. She remembered exactly how he took his lunch and never commented on it. Today was the first time they had spent time together anywhere that wasn't a job site. When the last piece was inside, Jack stood the dolly upright beside the door. "I'll come back Monday for the threshold work." "Monday," Olivia replied. He nodded, stepped off the porch, climbed into his truck, and drove away without looking back at the window. Halfway up the grade on Patton Avenue, he thought about Madeline for the first time in weeks. Just a flash of her standing at their old kitchen sink, hair tied back, laughing at something he had said. 5 years gone. Lily had been 3 when it happened. He didn't know what to do with the memory, so he let it sit beside him in the cab and kept driving. Back in the Montford kitchen, Olivia sat at the oak table she had bought from Cooper Antiques a month earlier. Her phone rested face down on the wood. She turned it over. The screen remained dark. She stared at it for a long time. She didn't type anything. She didn't set it down. She simply held it, the way people hold things they are not yet ready to release. Outside, afternoon sunlight moved slowly across the floorboards and refused to stop moving. 3 days passed without a single text message. On Monday morning, Jack began the floor work in the front room. White oak planks, 2¼ inches wide, custom milled from a salvaged barn outside Weaverville. He laid them tongue and groove and tapped them into alignment with a rubber mallet. The rhythm of the work allowed him to stop thinking for long stretches at a time. Olivia wasn't there. She had scheduled 3 early breakfast meetings at Crestwood Hospitality's downtown offices, followed by a site visit at the Highlands property and a planning session that stretched late into the evening. By Wednesday, her assistant had stopped asking why her calendar had suddenly become so crowded. On Tuesday afternoon, Lily arrived directly from school, as she often did when Jack was working. She dropped her backpack beside a sawhorse, pulled out a graham cracker, and headed straight for the canvas tool roll stored in the truck box. "Daddy." She lifted out a small bronze-bodied handplane, its soul still bright from the last sharpening. "What's this one for?" "Stanley number 4, Jack said. He set down the mallet and crouched beside her. "Smoothing plane. Hold it like this." He wrapped her small hands around the tote and front knob. "Push from the shoulder, not the wrist. Long strokes." Lily pushed. A pale curl of pine peeled away from the scrap board he handed her, no thicker than a breath. She made a satisfied little sound and tried again. Jack let her keep going. A little after 4, Eleanor Hayes climbed the porch steps and knocked on the open door. She smiled when she saw Lily surrounded by curls of wood shavings. Then she looked at Jack and the smile disappeared. Good timing. She placed a thick sealed manila envelope on the workbench. His name appeared on the front in her neat handwriting. "I've been holding this for 2 years, she said. "It's time." Jack waited until Lily wandered into the back room with a piece of chalk before opening it. Inside were legal documents from a Portland law firm, copies of his father's will, registered letters returned unopened, notifications that had never reached him, and finally, a handwritten note on yellow legal paper in handwriting he hadn't seen in 20 years. "Sawyer, I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm only asking that you let my grandchild know who her grandfather was in whatever way you choose. Dad." The note had been written 9 days before the obituary. According to the documents, Jack was the sole heir to Sullivan Timber Holdings, $340 million in Oregon timber assets, a mill in Coos Bay, a Portland office, and 4 generations of family legacy. He had walked away from all of it the year Madeline died. He read the note twice, then a third time. "I left that life when Madeline died, Eleanor," he said quietly. "I'm not going back for the money." "It isn't the money, Jack." She remained standing. "It's your father." He folded the envelope shut, carried it to the truck, and slid it into the glove compartment. He didn't open it again that day. Across town, at Crestwood Hospitality's offices on Battery Park Avenue, the receptionist buzzed Olivia's line. "Ma'am, there's a Mr. Derek Vaughn here. No appointment. He says he has 15 minutes of something you'll want to hear." Olivia looked at her schedule, then at the wall, then at her hands. "Send him in." Derek Vaughn was 44 years old, dressed in a charcoal jacket without a tie, carrying a leather portfolio that didn't creak when he opened it. He sat across from Olivia without being invited, and the way he did it suggested he had practiced never asking permission. "Miss Carter." His smile was small and patient. "I'll get straight to the point. I read the Citizen Times article about your divorce in March. I read the Highlands story last week. I read about the Montford house you purchased the month after." Olivia didn't move. "I'm not here to sell you something today," Derek said. "I'm here to ask you one question, and if you don't like it, I'll leave." She waited. "Why did you choose the smallest house you were allowed to choose at the exact moment you were finally free to choose the biggest?" The room became very still. Olivia didn't answer. She didn't have to. Derek watched her silence for 2 long seconds before turning the portfolio around. The photographs inside were beautiful. A stone and cedar estate bordering Biltmore Forest, 6 bedrooms, 12 wooded acres, a private pond, a view stretching toward Pisgah Ridge. Derek spoke about the property the way some men spoke about racehorses. "Off-market," he said, "never listed publicly. The owner values privacy." He explained the financing structure. $250,000 as a refundable good faith deposit. 60 days for due diligence. Private backing from investors in Charlotte. He never pressured her. "Come see it Saturday. If you walk away after the tour, you walk away. I won't call again." Olivia studied the photographs for a long time. "Saturday," she said. Derek left without another word, leaving the portfolio behind on her desk. Back in Montford, Jack finished the kitchen shelving and started fitting the brass cup pulls. Lily sat at the island with a birdhouse he had built for her the week before, holding a paintbrush in one hand and a jar of navy blue paint in the other. The birdhouse was already on its 2nd coat. "Don't drip on the floor." "I won't drip on the floor, Daddy." Olivia came through the back door a little after 6 and stopped in the kitchen doorway. She stood there for a long moment before either of them noticed her. Jack noticed first. He kept working on the hardware. "Jack," her voice was quiet, "I owe you an apology." "No, you don't." He didn't turn around. Yes, I do. I've treated you badly for 3 days. He finally set the screwdriver down and faced her, wiping his hands on his jeans. The kitchen light softened the lines around his eyes. Olivia. He held her gaze. You don't owe me anything. You said something true. I'm the one who didn't know what to do with it. She didn't answer. She simply nodded. Lily looked up from her painting. Miss Olivia, want to paint? Olivia looked at the child, the brush, and the open paint jar. Then she slowly pulled out the stool beside her. She picked up the second brush. Show me where. Lily pointed at the little wooden door on the front of the birdhouse. White, please, that part. Olivia dipped the brush and began painting. Jack turned back to the cabinet pulls and continued working. The Biltmore Forest property sat at the end of a private drive lined with rhododendrons. Afternoon sunlight spread across the stone facade exactly as Derek promised. The pond behind the house was smooth as glass beneath a thin film of pollen. Derek led Olivia through the home in stocking feet. He spoke about the staircase joinery, the age of the white oak in the dining room, the advantages of the closing timeline. He spoke numbers softly. He spoke about wire transfers and financing details. When the tour ended, Olivia said she needed time to think. Take the week, Derek replied. I'm not going anywhere. That same afternoon, the Asheville Crest Society blog published a new article. The byline belonged to Jessica Palmer. The headline stretched across the screen. Crestwood CEO's post-divorce reset includes a Rudge distraction. Beneath it were 2 photographs taken through the front window of Cooper Antiques. Olivia's hand resting on the walnut sideboard. Jack crouched beside her with sawdust on his cuff. The article referred to him as the contractor renovating her house and described, with a knowing tone, how recently divorced women in their late 30s sometimes lost their footing for a season. It mentioned the Montford property by name. It casually noted that the contractor's young daughter had been seen there after school. Jack was eating a sandwich on the tailgate of his truck when one of his crew members sent him the link. He read it once. Then he placed the phone face down beside him. He put both hands flat on the steel surface and breathed slowly through his nose. He didn't call Olivia. Olivia arrived home a little after 7. Her car was still warm in the driveway when she saw him sitting on the bottom porch step, jacket folded across his knees, the porch light still off. I don't know who leaked it, she said before she even climbed the steps. I do, Jack replied. He held out his phone. She took it. 3 browser tabs were open. The first was Jessica Palmer's article. The second was an older Asheville Crest story about a divorced gallery owner in Hot Springs. The wording was almost identical. 4 weeks after publication, that woman had entered an off-market real estate agreement with a consultant whose name never appeared publicly. The third article concerned a widow in Boone. Same structure, same byline. 4 weeks later, she had wired a substantial amount of money to a private financing company registered in Delaware. Olivia read the articles. Then she read them again. Derek, she said quietly. Probably, Jack answered. Don't sign anything until I know. She didn't ask why he had been investigating. She simply nodded. He sat beside her on the porch. She left a careful distance between them. Across the hedge, Eleanor Hayes's porch light flickered on. She stood in her front window holding a mug and chose not to come outside. The street lamps came alive one by one. Olivia's hand rested on the porch between them. Jack's rested on his knee. Neither moved. The following morning, Jack Sullivan was underneath the Montford house inspecting joists when his phone vibrated. He ignored it the first time. The second vibration arrived 30 seconds later, then a third. By the fourth, he slid out from beneath the crawlspace and checked the screen. Ryan Walker, Portland. Jack stared at the name before answering. What? Good morning to you too. Ryan's voice carried the same dry humor it always had. 15 years earlier, they had nearly gotten expelled together from Oregon State. You finally opened the file. Jack leaned against the foundation wall. How do you know? Because 3 attorneys called me yesterday. Your father's attorneys. My attorneys. A woman from Seattle who sounded personally offended that you ignored $340 million for 2 years. Jack closed his eyes. Ryan continued, You need to come to Portland. No. Jack. No. Silence followed. Then Ryan sighed. Then at least let me come to Asheville. Jack looked toward the street, toward the house, toward the front porch where Olivia's car sat parked beneath the maple tree. Why? Because someone is moving pieces around a board you're not looking at. Ryan's voice lost its humor. And I don't think it's only about the money. Jack agreed to nothing. Ryan booked the flight anyway. Across town, Olivia arrived at Crestwood Hospitality and found Victoria Carter waiting inside her office. Her mother rarely visited headquarters. When she did, people tended to move more carefully for the rest of the day. Victoria sat in one of the guest chairs with a newspaper folded neatly in her lap. Jessica Palmer's article was visible above the fold. "You're being watched." Olivia dropped her bag on the desk. "Good morning to you too." "I'm serious." Victoria tapped the paper. "This wasn't written to embarrass you. It was written to move you." Olivia sat down slowly. "Toward the property? Toward a decision." Victoria studied her daughter. "The question is who benefits from that decision." Olivia opened her laptop but didn't turn it on. "Jack thinks Derek Vaughn is involved." "Jack is probably right." "You say that very confidently." Victoria almost smiled. "Because Derek Vaughn approached me 8 years ago." Olivia looked up immediately. Victoria continued. "Different property, different circumstances, same strategy." She stood. "Don't buy the house." Then she left. At noon, Jessica Palmer published a second article. This one included photographs of Jack and Lily leaving a grocery store. Nothing scandalous. Nothing inappropriate. The comments section filled quickly. Most readers defended him. A few didn't. Jack discovered the article when Eleanor Hayes appeared at the job site, carrying 2 coffees and a newspaper folded beneath her arm. She placed both on the workbench. "You're famous now." Jack glanced at the headline and immediately lost interest. "I'm really not." Eleanor folded her arms. "You should talk to Olivia." "Why?" "Because she's sitting alone with this." Jack looked toward the front room where sunlight stretched across newly finished floors. Eleanor wasn't wrong. She rarely was. That evening, Olivia sat on the back porch with a glass of iced tea and her laptop balanced on one knee. The article remained open. She had read it 3 times already. None of it felt accidental. Her phone rang. The caller ID displayed Derek Vaughn. She almost declined the call. Instead, she answered, "Miss Carter." His voice sounded relaxed. "I wanted to check whether you'd reached a decision regarding the property." Olivia stared into the yard. "Not yet." "Of course." A pause followed. "I should mention another buyer expressed interest this afternoon." Olivia closed her eyes. There it was. Pressure. Gentle. Professional. Predictable. Then perhaps they should buy it. The silence on the other end lasted longer than expected. "I see." Derek's tone cooled slightly. "Well, if you change your mind, good night, Derek." She ended the call. 10 minutes later, headlights appeared in the driveway. Jack climbed out of his truck carrying nothing. No tools. No paperwork. Just himself. Olivia met him halfway across the yard. "You read the second article?" he asked. "Unfortunately." He nodded. "Ryan Walker is flying in tomorrow." "Who's Ryan?" "My best friend." Jack glanced toward the porch. "And one of the few people I trust." Olivia studied his face. "You think this is bigger than gossip?" "I do." "Why?" Jack looked toward the darkening street. "Because people don't spend this much effort photographing a contractor unless the contractor matters to something." Olivia felt a chill despite the warm evening air. "The inheritance? Maybe. The property? Maybe." Jack rubbed the back of his neck. "Or maybe both." They stood there quietly. The neighborhood settled around them. Porch lights glowed. Cicadas hummed in the trees. Somewhere a dog barked once and then stopped. Finally, Olivia asked the question she had been avoiding for days. "How much is it?" Jack frowned. "How much is what?" "The inheritance." He laughed softly, not because it was funny, because he was tired. $340 million. Olivia stared at him. $340 million? More or less. And you ignored it for 2 years? Yep. Why? Jack considered the question. Then he shrugged. because Madeline was dead. Olivia didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. Sometimes silence was the only honest response. The next morning, Ryan Walker arrived in Asheville carrying a duffel bag and the expression of a man who had already decided he was right about something. He met Jack at a diner near the river. By the time breakfast arrived, folders covered half the table. Corporate records, property transfers, financing structures, shell companies. Ryan tapped one page. There. Jack leaned closer. The company funding Derek Vaughn's real estate ventures had changed ownership 18 months earlier. The new parent company was registered in Delaware. The directors were hidden behind multiple layers of legal entities. Ryan flipped to the next page. And there. Another company. Another layer. Another transfer. Eventually Jack found the name, Richard Monroe. He sat back slowly. Richard Monroe had served on the board of Sullivan Timber Holdings 15 years earlier. He had also been one of the men who encouraged Jack's father to force succession plans immediately after Madeline's death. "That's impossible," Jack said quietly. Ryan shook his head. "No. It's expensive. Different thing." The waitress arrived with coffee refills and wisely chose not to ask questions. Jack stared at the paperwork. The room suddenly felt much smaller, because for the first time, the article, the property, the inheritance, and Derek Vaughn all existed inside the same story. And someone had started writing that story long before he realized he was part of it. Jack left the diner carrying copies of Ryan's research and a growing sense that events were moving faster than he understood. By noon, Ryan had installed himself at the Montfort house with a laptop, 2 legal pads, and enough coffee to alarm a cardiologist. Olivia returned from a morning meeting and found him sitting cross-legged on the living room floor surrounded by documents. "You must be Ryan." He looked up. "You must be Olivia. Jack said you were his best friend." "That depends who's telling the story." Olivia smiled despite herself. Ryan pointed toward the dining room. "Your contractor is pretending he isn't worried." Olivia followed his gesture. Through the doorway, Jack stood motionless beside the unfinished staircase, staring at a page he had already read 3 times. The expression on his face made it clear Ryan wasn't wrong. During the afternoon, the 3 of them worked through every document Ryan had brought from Portland: property transfers, corporate ownership records, financing agreements. The pattern became clearer with each page. Richard Monroe had spent years acquiring influence through layers of companies that rarely appeared connected on paper. Derek Vaughn's real estate ventures traced back through 3 separate holding firms before eventually arriving at entities controlled by Monroe. None of it proved criminal activity. All of it suggested deliberate planning. "The question," Ryan said, tapping a pencil against the table, "is why Olivia?" No one answered immediately. Olivia leaned back in her chair. "Because I have money." Ryan shook his head. "Lots of people have money." "Because I recently got divorced." "Lots of people get divorced." Jack finally looked up from the paperwork. "Because someone expected you to be lonely." The room fell silent. Olivia held his gaze. Neither looked away. Ryan glanced between them and quietly returned to reading. That evening, Jessica Palmer published another article. This one focused almost entirely on Olivia. The headline described her as a successful executive searching for reinvention after personal disappointment. The language remained careful enough to avoid legal action but pointed enough to shape public opinion. By the time Olivia finished reading it, 3 members of Crestwood Hospitality's board had emailed asking whether everything was all right. One requested a private meeting. Another suggested a public statement. The third simply attached the article and wrote, "Call me." Olivia closed her laptop. She had spent years building a reputation based on competence. It took Jessica Palmer less than a week to begin dismantling it. Her phone buzzed. Derek Vaughn. She ignored the call. 30 seconds later, a text message arrived. "No pressure. Just wanted to make sure you're doing okay." Olivia stared at the screen. Then she deleted the message without responding. The next morning began with rain. Gray clouds settled over Asheville and stayed there. Jack worked inside, installing trim in the upstairs hallway. Lily sat nearby drawing elaborate floor plans for what she insisted would someday become the world's first combination: animal shelter, science laboratory, and bakery. The bakery helps pay for everything, she explained. Naturally, Jack replied. Around 10, Eleanor Hayes arrived carrying blueberry muffins and local gossip. She set both on the kitchen counter. Jessica Palmer was seen having lunch with Derek Vaughn yesterday. Ryan looked up from his laptop. Seriously? Twice, actually. Eleanor poured herself coffee. One lunch downtown, one coffee meeting in Biltmore Village. Jack exchanged a glance with Olivia. It wasn't proof, but it wasn't nothing either. Later that afternoon, Ryan received a call from Portland. He listened for nearly 5 minutes without speaking. When the conversation ended, he slowly lowered the phone. Well, Jack immediately recognized the tone. What? Ryan leaned back in his chair. Richard Monroe is selling. Selling what? Everything. Olivia frowned. That seems sudden. Ryan nodded. Exactly. He slid the phone across the table. An industry publication displayed the headline, Monroe Holdings announces strategic restructuring. The article described asset liquidation, executive transitions, and planned retirement. To anyone else, it looked ordinary. To Ryan, it looked like someone preparing an exit. People don't walk away from power unless they have a reason, he said quietly, or unless they know something's coming. Jack looked toward the rain outside the windows. Water streamed down the glass. Somewhere beyond the neighborhood, beyond Asheville, beyond the mountains, a man he hadn't seen in 15 years was suddenly rearranging his entire life. The timing felt impossible to ignore. That night, Olivia couldn't sleep. Around midnight, she walked downstairs and found a light on in the kitchen. Jack sat alone at the table. A folder lay open in front of him. He looked up when she entered. Sorry. He closed it immediately. Didn't mean to wake anyone. Olivia poured herself a glass of water. You didn't. She sat across from him. For several moments neither spoke. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Finally Olivia glanced at the folder. Your father? Jack nodded. Some of the letters. Bad memories? He considered the question. Complicated memories. Olivia traced a finger around the rim of her glass. My father taught me how to negotiate before he taught me how to drive. Jack smiled faintly. That sounds about right. He also taught me that successful people have a tendency to confuse being needed with being loved. The smile disappeared. Jack looked at her carefully. That's a hard lesson. It was. The rain continued falling. Somewhere upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Olivia looked toward the dark hallway before turning back to him. For what it's worth, I don't think your father stopped loving you. Jack stared at the folder for a long time. Maybe, his voice softened, maybe that's what makes it harder. Neither spoke after that. They simply sat together while rain moved across Asheville, and the night slowly carried itself toward morning. By Friday, the pressure began arriving from multiple directions. Reporters called Crestwood Hospitality, asking for comments. Investors contacted Olivia regarding the Biltmore Forest property. A lawyer representing one of Derek Vaughn's companies emailed twice requesting a decision before the end of the week. Meanwhile, Ryan uncovered another connection. The Delaware holding company financing Derek's developments had recently purchased a minority interest in a commercial project outside Portland. The project sat directly beside timberland once owned by Sullivan Timber Holdings. Jack stared at the documents spread across the dining room table. Every road kept leading back to the same names. Richard Monroe, Derek Vaughn, and now, somehow, him. Olivia stood beside the window, watching evening settle over Montford. What happens if you're right? She asked. Ryan looked at Jack. Jack looked at the paperwork, then toward Lily, who sat on the floor building an elaborate city from wooden blocks. Finally, he answered. Then someone spent years building a plan around people they never expected to meet. Outside, thunder rolled across the mountains. Inside, nobody argued with him, because the more they uncovered, the harder it became to believe any of this was coincidence. Saturday arrived beneath a sky washed clean by the previous night's storm. The air smelled of wet earth and fresh-cut grass. Jack was already awake when Ryan knocked on the workshop door behind the bungalow. He entered carrying 2 coffees and an expression that suggested he had found something important. Tell me you haven't started working yet. Jack looked down at the cabinet door he was sanding. I've been working for 2 hours. Ryan handed him a coffee anyway. Good. Then you're awake enough to hear this. He spread several printed documents across the workbench. Property acquisitions, corporate filings, internal correspondence obtained through a contact in Charlotte. Jack leaned forward. Ryan pointed at a date. 3 months before Derek Vaughn approached Olivia, then another. 2 weeks before Jessica Palmer published her first article, then another. 6 months before the divorce was finalized. Jack stared at the pages. The timeline fit together too neatly. Someone had been tracking Olivia long before she became a target. Richard Monroe, Jack said quietly. Ryan nodded. Or someone working for him. Neither possibility made him feel better. Meanwhile, Olivia spent the morning at the Crestwood offices, preparing for a board strategy session. She sat through presentations, reviewed financial reports, signed contracts, answered questions. Yet her attention kept drifting back toward Montford, toward the house, toward Jack. Around noon, Richard Monroe himself called. Olivia almost ignored it. Almost. Instead, she answered, "Mr. Monroe." Olivia. His voice sounded warm, grandfatherly even, the kind of voice people trusted before realizing they shouldn't. "I wanted to personally congratulate you on the Highlands expansion." Olivia remained silent. Richard continued, "You've done remarkable work." "Thank you. I was sorry to see the recent press coverage." Olivia looked through the office windows toward downtown Asheville. "Were you?" A brief pause followed. Tiny, barely noticeable. "Of course." She heard it anyway. "I appreciate the concern. If there's anything I can do to help, I'll let you know." She ended the call. When she lowered the phone, she already knew 2 things. First, Richard Monroe was paying attention. Second, he was nervous. That evening, Olivia drove to Montford without calling ahead. The house was quiet when she arrived. She found Jack and Lily in the backyard sitting beneath the dogwood tree. Lily was teaching him the rules of a game she had invented 30 seconds earlier. The rules appeared to change every time she lost. Olivia stood at the edge of the yard watching them. Neither noticed her immediately. Jack laughed at something Lily said. A real laugh, not polite, not careful. Olivia realized she had never seen him like that before. He finally looked up and spotted her. "Hey!" Lily turned. "Olivia!" She ran across the grass and threw her arms around her waist without hesitation. Olivia hugged her automatically. Jack stood and walked over. "Everything okay?" Olivia nodded. "Richard Monroe called me." The smile disappeared from his face. What did he want? To be helpful. Ryan appeared from the workshop carrying another stack of papers. That's usually when rich people become dangerous. Olivia accepted the folder he handed her. The first page contained an internal memorandum from Sullivan Timber Holdings, dated 7 years earlier. Richard Monroe's name appeared 3 times. So did hers. Olivia read the document again, then a 3rd time. "Why am I in this?" Ryan folded his arms. "Because your company owns one of the last hospitality corridors Monroe failed to acquire." Silence settled over the yard. Even Lily sensed the shift and wandered back toward her game. Olivia looked at Jack. This was never about the house. No. Or the deposit. No. Ryan tapped the folder. The property was bait. The goal was influence. Olivia stared at the paperwork. For months she had believed she was navigating separate problems. A divorce, a house renovation, a suspicious real estate offer, gossip, public scrutiny. Suddenly every thread connected to the same hand. Monday morning brought another surprise. Federal agents executed a search warrant on offices linked to Derek Vaughn's financing network. By noon, local business publications carried the story. By 2 o'clock, Jessica Palmer had deleted 6 articles from the Asheville Crest website. By 4, Derek stopped answering his phone. Ryan watched developments from the dining room table with the satisfaction of a man who enjoyed being proven right. People always panic at the wrong moment. Jack looked up from the trim he was fitting. Meaning? If Derek had stayed quiet, he might have survived this. Ryan refreshed the page. Now he's running. Olivia arrived home shortly after sunset carrying takeout containers and exhaustion. She dropped into a chair at the kitchen table. "Tell me something good." Ryan didn't hesitate. "The case is getting bigger." Olivia stared at him. "That's your good news?" "Compared to yesterday, absolutely." Jack laughed despite himself. Later that night, after Ryan finally returned to his hotel, Olivia found Jack alone on the front porch. The neighborhood was quiet. Summer insects hummed beyond the hedges. Porch lights glowed softly up and down the street. She sat beside him. Not too close. Not far away either. For several minutes they watched the street without speaking. Finally, Olivia broke the silence. When Cooper's owner called us husband and wife, Jack smiled immediately. Yeah? You never corrected her. He looked down at his hands. No. Why? The question hung between them. Jack thought about lying, thought about deflecting, thought about changing the subject entirely. Instead, he chose honesty. Because for half a second I wished she was right. Olivia looked away toward the streetlights. A car rolled past slowly at the far end of the block. Somewhere a screen door closed. Me too, she admitted. The words arrived quietly. No drama, no performance, just truth. Jack closed his eyes briefly. The porch seemed smaller somehow, warmer. Neither moved closer, neither needed to. Some things changed the moment they were spoken aloud. This was one of them. Across the street, Eleanor Hayes stood at her window, holding a mug and pretending very badly not to watch. She smiled into her tea and switched off the kitchen light. The next morning began differently, not dramatically, not with declarations or decisions, just differently. Olivia woke before sunrise and found herself smiling before she understood why. The realization annoyed her enough that she laughed at herself while making coffee. Across town, Jack stood in his workshop staring at a half-finished cabinet door and accomplishing absolutely nothing. He eventually admitted this to himself, set the tools down, and drove to the Montford house 2 hours earlier than necessary. Lily noticed immediately. "You're weird today." "Thank you. That wasn't a compliment. I gathered that." By mid-morning, Ryan Walker arrived carrying another folder and looking entirely too pleased with himself. "Good news." Jack leaned against the kitchen counter. "Every time you say that, my life gets more complicated." "Probably true." Ryan dropped the folder onto the table. Federal prosecutors moved up the timetable. Olivia looked up from her laptop. "Meaning?" "Meaning Derek Vaughn isn't negotiating anymore." He opened the file. "He's cooperating." Silence settled over the room. Ryan pointed to a statement summary. 3 hours of interviews yesterday. Names, accounts, transactions. Jack sat down. "Richard Monroe?" Ryan nodded, repeatedly. Olivia slowly closed her laptop. For months, Richard Monroe had existed as an untouchable figure. Wealthy, connected, protected by layers of influence and distance. Suddenly, that protection looked thinner than anyone realized. "What happens now?" she asked. Ryan smiled faintly. "Now people start telling the truth because they're afraid someone else will tell it first." 3 days later, the Crestwood Hospitality Board convened an emergency session. Olivia entered the conference room expecting resistance. Instead, she found concern. Richard Monroe's name appeared in multiple investigative reports by then. Financial journalists had begun connecting companies, acquisitions, and advisory contracts. Nothing criminal had been proven publicly. Yet the questions were multiplying faster than the answers. Richard attended by video conference. His image appeared on the large screen at the far end of the room. Calm, controlled, professional, exactly as always. The meeting lasted 42 minutes. During the 43rd, one board member asked whether Richard had ever held a financial interest in any company connected to Derek Vaughn. The pause before Richard answered lasted less than 3 seconds. It felt much longer. No. The answer arrived smoothly. Unfortunately, Ryan had already provided documentation proving otherwise. By the end of the afternoon, Richard Monroe resigned from 3 advisory positions and announced an indefinite leave of absence from all active business operations. News outlets described the move as strategic. Nobody in the room believed that explanation. That evening, Olivia drove home through light rain. The house looked different now that the renovation was nearly complete. Warm light glowed behind restored windows. The front porch no longer sagged. The old place stood straighter somehow, as though it had remembered what it was built to be. She found Jack on the back porch sanding the final section of railing. "You know," she said, "most contractors finish a project and leave. Most clients don't keep finding federal investigations in the walls." She laughed. The sound surprised both of them. Jack set the sandpaper down. How bad was the board meeting? Not bad. She leaned against the railing beside him. Mostly people pretending they weren't surprised. And were they? No. The rain continued softly around them. Olivia looked out over the backyard. The house is finished. Almost. Almost. Jack pointed toward a corner near the kitchen windows. One piece left. She followed his finger. The old porch swing. Removed months earlier during the structural repairs. Still waiting in the workshop. Olivia smiled. You saved it. Of course I saved it. Why? Jack looked at her as though the answer should have been obvious. Because you loved it. Neither spoke for a moment after that. The following Saturday, Asheville hosted its annual Summer Arts Festival. Downtown streets filled with artists, musicians, food vendors, and tourists moving beneath bright banners stretched between buildings. Lily spent 15 minutes deciding between handmade soap, kettle corn, and carved wooden animals before choosing all three. Olivia walked beside her, carrying two of the purchases. Jack carried the third. Around noon they stopped near Pack Square where a local bluegrass band played beneath a white tent. The crowd drifted slowly around them. Lily danced without embarrassment. Children possess that gift naturally. Adults spend years trying to recover it. She gets that from Madeline, Jack said quietly. Olivia watched Lily spin in circles near the stage. Was she like that? Exactly like that. He smiled. Madeline never cared who was watching. Olivia looked at him. You still talk about her like she's here. Jack considered the observation. Sometimes she is. There was no sadness in his voice. Not anymore. Just memory, honest and uncomplicated. Olivia reached for his hand without really deciding to. Their fingers touched, then remained together. Neither commented on it. Neither needed to. That night, after Lily fell asleep in the guest room she had unofficially claimed months earlier, Olivia and Jack sat on the front porch steps. Fireflies moved through the darkness beyond the yard. Somewhere down the street, someone played guitar badly but enthusiastically. Ryan leaves tomorrow, Olivia said. I know. The investigations will keep going. I know. The reporters will probably find something new to write about. Jack nodded. Probably. Olivia turned toward him. What happens when all of this is over? For a moment, Jack simply looked at her. The porch light softened the lines around her face. The house behind her stood quiet and warm. The future waited somewhere beyond the streetlights. Honestly? He asked. Honestly. He smiled. I'd like to take you to dinner. Olivia laughed. That's your plan? Seems reasonable. After federal investigations, corporate scandals, inheritance battles, and 6 months of emotional confusion, especially after those things. She shook her head. You could have asked weeks ago. I know. Why didn't you? Jack looked toward the street. Because sometimes the right thing arrives before you're ready to hold it. The silence that followed felt comfortable, familiar, earned. Olivia slipped her hand into his. This time neither pretended it happened by accident. Above them, the porch light glowed softly against the summer darkness. Somewhere inside the house, Lily turned over in her sleep. And for the first time since Cooper Antiques, neither of them flinched from what the future might look like. Ryan Walker left Asheville on Sunday afternoon. Lily hugged him twice before allowing him to get into the rental car. You're supposed to come back. Ryan pointed toward Jack. That depends on your father. That's a terrible answer. Probably. He looked at Olivia. See? She gets her negotiating skills from you. Olivia laughed. Ryan climbed into the car and drove away. The street seemed quieter after he left. Not empty, just different. The way a room feels after someone important walks out of it. Life settled into something closer to normal after that. The federal investigation continued in the background. Derek Vaughn entered cooperation agreements. Additional financial records surfaced. Richard Monroe disappeared from public view almost entirely. Business reporters kept writing stories, but Asheville eventually found newer subjects to discuss. Cities are good at that. They move forward whether people are ready or not. The Montford house was finally complete. Every floorboard sat true. Every door closed properly. Every window opened smoothly. The porch swing returned to its place beneath the front overhang. One evening, Olivia found herself sitting there alone, watching the last light fade from the sky. She heard footsteps on the porch behind her and knew who it was before she turned around. Jack carried 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need this. Mind reader?" Educated guess. He handed her a cup and sat beside her. The swing moved gently beneath their weight. For a while they watched the neighborhood settle into evening. Porch lights appeared one by one. A dog barked somewhere down the block. Someone laughed in a backyard across the street. Ordinary sounds. The kind people rarely notice until they matter. "You know," Olivia said quietly, "when I bought this house, everyone thought I was making a mistake." Jack looked at her. "Did you?" "Sometimes." She smiled faintly, mostly because it felt too small. "And now?" Olivia looked around, the restored porch, the dogwood tree, the warm glow through the front windows, the swing moving slowly beneath them. "Now it feels exactly right." Jack nodded as though that answer made perfect sense. Maybe it did. A week later, Lily arrived at the house carrying a folded piece of paper she refused to let anyone see. She spent the entire afternoon protecting it from curiosity. At dinner, she finally placed it on the table. "I made a list." Jack looked immediately concerned. "That usually means trouble." "Not this time." Lily unfolded the paper. At the top, written in careful block letters, were the words, "Family Rules." Olivia covered her mouth to hide a smile. Lily began reading. "Rule 1. Nobody eats dinner alone, unless they want to." Jack nodded. "Reasonable." "Rule 2. Nobody pretends they're okay when they're not." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "That's ambitious." "Rule 3. Lily looked directly at both of them. "People should say things before it's too late." Silence settled around the table, not uncomfortable, just real. Jack stared at the list. Olivia looked down at her plate. Lily waited. Finally, Jack cleared his throat. "That's a pretty good rule." "I know." Lily folded the paper. "I wrote it." The matter appeared settled in her mind. The following Friday, Olivia attended a hospitality conference in Charlotte. She spent the day speaking on panels, reviewing development proposals, and answering questions about industry trends. It should have been a successful trip. It was. Yet by mid-afternoon she found herself checking her phone more often than necessary. By 5 o'clock she gave up pretending. She called Jack from the hotel lobby. "Everything okay?" he asked immediately. Olivia smiled. "Interesting that you assume something is wrong. You're calling during business hours." "Fair point." She sat near a large window overlooking the city. "How's Lily?" "Teaching me why her science project requires a pulley system." "Does it?" "Apparently." Olivia laughed softly. The sound seemed to relax both of them. Neither had realized how much they missed hearing the other's voice until that moment. They talked for 15 minutes about absolutely nothing important. The weather, the house, the science project, a coffee shop opening near Haywood Road. When the call ended, Olivia remained seated by the window for several minutes, smiling, not because anything extraordinary had happened, because something ordinary had. Late Sunday afternoon, Eleanor Hayes appeared at the Montfort house carrying a cardboard box. She set it on the kitchen counter. "Found these in storage." Olivia opened the box carefully. Inside were photographs, old letters, newspaper clippings. Most belonged to Victoria Carter and Grace Sullivan from their university years in Oregon. Olivia lifted one photograph after another. 2 young women standing in front of forestry buildings. Hiking trails, campus events, research projects, dreams still taking shape. Jack joined her beside the counter. Together they sorted through decades of history. Then Olivia found something folded between 2 photographs. A letter, unsent, written by Victoria Carter shortly after Grace Sullivan's death. Her handwriting filled both sides of the page. She wrote about grief, about unfinished plans, about promises she hoped one day to keep. Near the bottom, one sentence stood out. "If our children ever meet, I hope they find each other more easily than we found ourselves." Olivia read it twice, then handed it to Jack. Neither spoke. Eleanor quietly excused herself and left through the back door. Some moments belong only to the people inside them. That evening, after Lily fell asleep upstairs, Jack and Olivia sat together on the porch swing. The letter rested between them. Fireflies drifted through the yard. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled softly across the mountains. "Do you think they knew?" Olivia asked. Jack looked down at the paper. "Maybe." "About us?" He smiled. "I'm not sure there was an us back then." Olivia leaned her shoulder gently against his. "There is now." Jack closed his eyes briefly, not because he was surprised, because hearing it aloud mattered. The swing moved softly beneath them. The dogwood leaves rustled in the evening breeze, and for the first time since that afternoon at Cooper Antiques, when a joke slipped accidentally into the truth, neither of them felt the need to look away from it. Autumn arrived slowly in Asheville. The mountains shifted from deep green to gold, copper, and crimson. Tourists filled scenic overlooks. Local coffee shops became crowded with people carrying cameras and sweaters they only wore 3 months each year. Life continued moving forward. Olivia Carter spent most weekdays at Crestwood Hospitality and most evenings in Montford. Eventually, nobody questioned it anymore. Some transitions happen so gradually that people stop noticing when they become permanent. One Tuesday afternoon, Olivia returned home to find Jack standing in the front yard, examining the old dogwood tree. His hands were in his pockets. His attention appeared completely fixed on the branches. "Problem?" she asked. "Maybe." He pointed upward. "The tree's healthy. That sounds like the opposite of a problem. It means it'll probably outlive both of us." Olivia laughed. "You've been staring at a tree because it's too healthy?" Jack nodded seriously. "Exactly." She shook her head and walked toward the porch. "You are a very strange man. Not the first time I've heard that." "Won't be the last." Lily opened the front door before either reached it. "Good. You're both here." The tone immediately made them suspicious. "Why?" Jack asked carefully. Lily folded her arms. "School project." Both adults groaned. "That reaction feels disrespectful." Lily informed them. "What was your biggest mistake? What would you tell your younger self?" Olivia answered thoughtfully. Jack attempted to avoid several questions and failed. Lily wrote everything down. At one point she looked directly at Olivia. "What's your favorite thing about my dad?" Jack nearly choked on his coffee. Olivia stared at Lily. Lily stared back. Neither blinked. "That's not a school question." "It is now." Jack quietly excused himself and retreated toward the kitchen while Olivia tried unsuccessfully not to laugh. Eventually she answered, "He always means what he says." Lily wrote it down immediately. "Good answer." From the kitchen came the unmistakable sound of a cabinet door, closing much harder than necessary. A week later, federal prosecutors announced formal charges against several executives connected to Richard Monroe's business network. Derek Vaughn entered a full cooperation agreement. Jessica Palmer published a public apology, acknowledging that her reporting had relied on information supplied through sources she failed to properly verify. The statement appeared online at 7 in the morning. By noon, everyone in Asheville had seen it. Olivia received dozens of messages. Some supportive, some curious, a few embarrassed on behalf of people who had believed the stories. She ignored most of them. Around lunchtime, her phone rang. The caller ID displayed Richard Monroe. Olivia looked at the screen for several seconds before answering. "Hello." Richard sounded older than she remembered. Tired. "Olivia." She waited. "I owe you an apology." The words arrived without hesitation. "No excuses. No justifications. You do." Silence followed. Then Richard sighed. "For what it's worth, I never intended for any of it to become personal." Olivia looked out the office window toward downtown Asheville. "That might be the problem." Another pause. Longer this time. Perhaps. When the call ended, she sat quietly for several minutes, not because she forgave him, not because she hated him, simply because some chapters deserved acknowledgement before they closed. Later that evening, Jack found her sitting alone on the porch swing. The apology call had clearly stayed with her. He sat beside her without speaking. The swing moved gently beneath them. Finally, Olivia asked, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if none of this occurred?" Jack considered the question. "You mean if Cooper Antiques never happened?" "If any of it never happened." Jack looked toward the street. Leaves drifted across the sidewalk in the fading light. "I would have finished another job. And started another one." Olivia nodded. I would have bought the wrong house. Probably. And trusted the wrong people. Definitely. She smiled despite herself. Jack turned toward her. Want to know what I actually think? Sure. I think life spent a long time putting us on the same road. Olivia studied him quietly. That sounds suspiciously romantic. Ryan says I have hidden depths. Ryan lies. Frequently. The swing continued moving. Neither felt the need to say more. The following Saturday, Eleanor Hayes hosted a neighborhood gathering. Officially, it was an autumn supper. Unofficially, it was Eleanor's way of checking on everyone she cared about at the same time. Neighbors filled the backyard carrying casseroles, desserts, folding chairs, and opinions. String lights glowed overhead. Children ran through piles of leaves. Someone brought a guitar. Someone else brought a fiddle. At some point, nobody could remember exactly when, Lily climbed onto a picnic bench and demanded everyone's attention. I have an announcement. Conversations stopped. Adults exchanged concerned looks. Lily unfolded a piece of paper. After careful observation, I have concluded that Olivia and my dad are both idiots. Complete silence. Then Eleanor Hayes laughed so hard she nearly spilled her tea. Jack covered his face with one hand. Olivia looked ready to disappear into the ground. Lily continued reading. Fortunately, they appear to be improving. The entire backyard erupted with laughter. Even Jack eventually gave up and laughed too. The embarrassment lasted several minutes. The warmth of the moment lasted much longer. As the evening drew to a close, and guests slowly drifted home beneath the autumn stars, Olivia stood at the edge of the yard, watching children chase fireflies. Jack joined her carrying 2 cups of coffee. You know, he said, I'm beginning to think Lily enjoys creating chaos. Olivia accepted the cup. Beginning? Jack laughed. Above them, the sky stretched clear and endless over Asheville. The mountains stood dark against the horizon. The investigations were ending. The lies had been exposed. The house was finished. The future no longer felt uncertain. For the first time in a very long while, everything seemed to be moving exactly where it belonged. Winter arrived gently that year. Asheville rarely received heavy snow, but several light storms drifted through the mountains before Christmas, leaving rooftops dusted white and turning the Blue Ridge ridgelines into watercolor landscapes. The Montfort house glowed warmly against the cold. Lights hung along the porch railing. A wreath decorated the front door. The dogwood tree stood bare in the yard, waiting patiently for spring. Inside, life had found a rhythm nobody questioned anymore. Olivia no longer referred to the house as temporary. Jack no longer knocked before walking through the back door. Lily had entirely given up pretending she lived anywhere else half the time. On the first Saturday in December, Eleanor Hayes hosted another gathering. Officially, it was a holiday dinner. Unofficially, it was an excuse to feed half the neighborhood. Every chair in her dining room was occupied. Every surface held food. Conversations overlapped. Laughter moved through the house like music. At one point, Eleanor stood beside the fireplace and raised a glass. To second chances. The room answered with agreement. Olivia looked across the table. Jack happened to be looking at her at the exact same moment. Neither looked away. The following week, Crestwood Hospitality finalized its most successful year in company history. Revenue exceeded projections. Employee retention reached record levels. Expansion plans moved forward without complication. During the final board meeting before the holidays, one director congratulated Olivia on steering the company through a difficult period. Another called her leadership transformative. Olivia accepted the compliments politely. Yet while driving home afterward, she found herself thinking less about business achievements and more about a porch swing, a workshop that smelled like sawdust, and a little girl who believed dessert qualified as a food group. Success had changed shape. She was still learning what that meant. 3 days before Christmas, Jack received a letter. Actual paper. Actual envelope. No return address. He opened it at the kitchen table while Lily decorated cookies and Olivia attempted to prevent excessive frosting-related disasters. Inside was a short note from Richard Monroe. There were no explanations, no requests, no attempts at redemption, only a brief acknowledgement. You were right to walk away when I thought power mattered more than people. It took me too long to understand the difference. Jack read the note once. then folded it carefully and placed it back inside the envelope. "Bad news?" Olivia asked. "No." He looked toward the window. Snow drifted lightly beyond the glass. "Just a very late realization." Olivia nodded. She understood. Christmas morning arrived cold and bright. Lily woke everyone before sunrise because waiting was apparently impossible. Presents accumulated beneath the tree over several weeks through a combination of careful planning, last-minute decisions, and Eleanor Hayes ignoring every budget she set for herself. Wrapping paper covered half the living room floor before breakfast. Lily opened a science kit, 3 books, a winter coat she immediately declared fashionable, and enough art supplies to concern local retailers. Jack received a new set of carving tools. Olivia received a framed photograph. The image had been taken during the autumn supper at Eleanor's house. Lily stood between them laughing at something neither adult remembered. Jack looked surprised. Olivia looked happy. The moment had been ordinary when it happened. Looking at it now, it felt important. On the back of the frame, written in Lily's careful handwriting, were 6 words. "Family is who stays when life changes." Olivia read the sentence twice before setting the frame gently on the mantel. Later that afternoon, after visitors left and dishes were cleaned and Lily disappeared upstairs to experiment with her new science kit, Jack found Olivia standing on the front porch. Snowflakes drifted lazily through the air. The neighborhood sat quiet beneath winter light. He stepped beside her. Neither spoke immediately. They had grown comfortable with silence. It no longer demanded filling. Finally, Jack reached into his coat pocket. "I've been carrying this around for 3 weeks. Olivia looked at the small box in his hand, then at him. "That seems inefficient." He laughed. "Probably." The box remained closed. "I had a speech prepared." "Really? A pretty good one. What happened to it?" Jack looked toward the snowy street. "Lily informed me yesterday that overthinking is one of my worst qualities." Olivia smiled. "She's not wrong." "No." He took a breath. "She usually isn't." Then he looked back at her. No rehearsed speech, no perfect words, just honesty. The same thing that had brought them this far. "I love you." The sentence settled softly into the winter air. "And I'd like to spend the rest of my life making sure you know that." Olivia felt tears before she realized they were there. Not dramatic tears, not overwhelmed tears. Simply the quiet kind that arrive when something finally reaches the place it was always meant to go. "Good," she said softly. "Because I love you too." Jack opened the box. The ring inside wasn't extravagant. It wasn't designed to impress strangers. It was elegant, thoughtful, real. Olivia laughed through her tears. "You really did overthink this. A little, a lot." "Fair." She held out her hand anyway. Inside the house, a second-floor window opened. Lily appeared immediately. "Wait." Both adults looked up. "Did she just—" Olivia began. "Yep." Jack sighed. Lily leaned halfway out the window. "I knew it," she shouted. "I absolutely knew it." Somewhere behind her, Eleanor Hayes's voice echoed from another room. "Get away from that window." Lily ignored the instruction completely. "Can I be in charge of the wedding cake?" Jack closed his eyes. Olivia laughed so hard she had to lean against him. Snow continued falling around them. The neighborhood remained quiet. The future stretched ahead in ways none of them could fully predict, and somehow that felt perfectly fine. Spring returned to Asheville 4 months later. The dogwood tree bloomed again. The porch swing remained in constant use. Crestwood hospitality continued thriving. Jack continued restoring things others believed could not be repaired. Lily continued asking impossible questions and occasionally answering them herself. Some evenings, neighbors walking past the Montfort house would see 3 people sitting together on the porch. Coffee cups, conversation, laughter. Ordinary moments. The kind people often overlook while searching for bigger stories. But the truth was simple. The biggest story had never been the investigations, or the money, or the scandals. It had never been the house. The real story was what happened after all those things ended. A woman learning that starting over wasn't failure. A man learning that grief and love could exist in the same heart without competing. A child reminding adults that honesty is usually easier than fear. and a family built not through obligation, but through choice. On warm evenings, when sunlight settled across the porch and the mountains glowed blue beyond the city, Olivia sometimes thought about the day she first walked into Cooper Antiques, about a contractor in a blue flannel shirt examining furniture, about a joke that wasn't really a joke, about how close she came to walking away from all of it. Then she would look toward Jack, toward Lily, toward the life waiting around her every ordinary day, and feel grateful she didn't. Because sometimes the most valuable things in the world are not discovered in boardrooms, contracts, or inheritances. Sometimes they are found in front porches, shared coffee, repaired houses, and people who quietly choose one another over and over again. The end.